All right. Welcome back to All Cars, y'all. I am John. It is time for another Motorweek Retro Review reaction, and this one has been requested by a viewer, and I kept moving it down the list of ones, but finally it is time to get to it because it goes back to the heart of what this channel is about. Really crappy 80s cars. This week it is the 1987 Yugo and Hyundai Excel. Motorweek Retro Reviews. I'm excited about this one. I already have thoughts, but let's jump into it, see what they say.
Now, a few months back on What's New on Wheels, we reported on two new low-cost basic transportation imports. This Yugo GV from Yugoslavia and the Hyundai Excel from Korea. We had a chance since then to take them both for a long drive. We're glad to say that neither car came up short. But now that they're on the market, how tall will these newcomers stand in America's lot of imported cars?
Okay, so before they jump on, we all have the benefit here of hindsight, of knowing what happened here. It'll be interesting to see what they say when the cars are brand spanking new from the factory, that theoretically everything is going to work on them. And we'll talk about styling here in a minute because, well, let's just get to it, right? Oh, I forgot to say, oh my gosh, as always, it's just you and me chatting. Grab your beverage of choice, sit back in your comfy chair. Let's take this little trip down memory lane.
Judging by the initial sales of the Yugo GV anyway, fairly tall. In the East, dealers are selling their Yugos before the cars are even off the boat. The reason seems to be the Yugo's advertised $3,990 base price. Our dealer test car, though, had a sticker of around $5,300 after add-ons such as rust-proofing and undercoating. The only substantial extra was an AM/FM radio.
Oh, I don't know how fast they're going to be going through all this, so let's pause it there. I'm not going to try to adjust it for inflation. That's a screaming deal. I think the Yugo looks okay. I've always kind of liked it, but it's not like I love it. Primarily because it's an older Fiat design that they sold to whoever it was in Yugoslavia. And so it's a very old design. I love hatchbacks. I don't necessarily love two-door hatchbacks, but this has a very high, gangly, up on stilts look to it. I like the idea of this car, but I don't especially love how it ended up. It was fine. It was fine. And remind me, I'll tell you at the end here the story, if you hadn't heard it, about my family when we looked at a Yugo.
The dash is stylish and attractive, though for instrumentation you get just the essentials. A 4-speed manual is the only available transmission, and let's hope you live in a cool climate, cause there's no air conditioning offered. But cloth upholstery and carpeting are included in the base price, along with a rear wiper and defogger. And there's a fold-down rear seat, or sort of fold-down rear seat, since it doesn't fold all the way down.
So, lots to talk there. I actually think the dash is pretty cool. The plastics are honestly so cheap. I think they look good. I'm going to come back to that on the Excel. But I actually think the dash is okay. It's given you just the essentials. No oil pressure gauge and everything else. Just here's a speedometer. A 4-speed manual, that was a loser by 1987. Not having a 5-speed, not having an automatic, although question what the engine would do with an automatic, and not having an air conditioner as an option. No, not going to happen here in the South, especially. And then this back seat, not folding down all the way to this weird angle. I mean, my Volkswagen was, I think, an 87, a Fox, right? Station wagon. So quite a bit longer than this. It had this stuff figured out, and that was an old Audi design. So not a lot of attention to detail, and I think, again, really shows its much older roots. It's okay. The fact is if you were buying it for $4,000, stop complaining.
The Yugo uses what space it has well, though, and there is room for two back there, but all seat backs are a little thin. At only 1,800 pounds, the easy-to-handle front-drive Yugo carries most of its weight in the front.
Hey, what do you want the Yugo?
The whole car is based on Fiat components, all built in Yugoslavia. Under the hood is a 1.1-liter overhead cam four-cylinder, not unlike those engines Fiat once sent over in their own cars. However, Yugo mileage is unspectacular for its size at 25 city and 31 highway.
They're rushing through this, and they didn't talk about the horsepower there, but 1.1 liter, I mean, that's small. And I don't know, what was a Tercel engine at this time? I don't even know off the top of my head, but that's really small. And let's remember, that's one of the bigger engines they offered, that just to get it to America and be close to competitive. They can say what they want. That gas mileage, 25 and 31, not bad, okay? Not great. Again, my Accord, I get 20 in the city. Well, I get more than 20 in the city, and I get nearly 40 on the highway. This is not great. And this car doesn't have aerodynamics. Okay, it could be worse, but overall, just an inefficient powertrain on a small car. But the interior was pretty space efficient. It's a tiny, tiny car, and they talked about the seat backs there. I don't know if you noticed or not. The guy kept hitting his head on the headliner. So not a large car, but the Europeans were good at making use of what space they had. So far, it's okay, until you remember it's $4,000.
Even with its tiny power plant, the Yugo did better than we expected in acceleration. Although a quarter-mile time of 20.1 seconds at 69 is slow by today's standards. But a 0 to 60 time of 16 seconds is comparable to most base import economy models. That still means, though, that you have to allow plenty of space for pulling onto an interstate.
That's insane. 20 seconds. And even then, they were like, yeah, that's slow. But what's funny is when you look at this car, it looks like it's narrow, and then they raised it, almost like an SUV. They raised it up on the suspension, and then they put tiny little tires on. Everything about this car screams old and cheap. Interesting, but that was slightly more positive from them overall than I expected.
If you've ever driven a small Fiat, then the Yugo will feel familiar. You know the steering is heavy, but the car is fairly maneuverable. In tight maneuvers, though, the Yugo's front weight bias causes plow followed by a twitch of the tail, which shows up even more in a 55-mile-an-hour lane change. All told, the Yugo design is a bit dated, but it does have plenty of standard perks like real working vent windows that make it very attractive. And the fit and finish on our car was good.
Okay. So it has plenty of perks. Now, those aren't reliability, a 5-speed, an automatic, an engine with any power, great gas mileage, good build quality, handling. Whew. But you get vent windows, just like you could in the 60s from an American car.
Of course, there's no way of knowing how reliable the Yugo will turn out to be. But if past Fiat durability is any guide, buyers shouldn't exactly expect it to last forever. However, the Yugo is backed by a full car warranty for 1 year, and a 5-year warranty on the drivetrain is available. And if
that was tactfully put. Let's all give credit where credit is due here. I imagine when they were scripting this, how do we say it's going to be unreliable without saying it, right? Okay, so it's based on Fiat, so expect it to not last forever. That's a good one. So, literally, that's a great way of putting it. I don't distrust Fiats. I live in an age where I don't distrust them. I know there's so much jokes about their previous quality, but I've always kind of thought they made cool cars. But a Fiat design built in Yugoslavia by former communists brought here by Bricklin, not a recipe for lasting forever. It would be curious at the end of this if they compare this with a Civic or a Tercel or a Corolla or just anything in the world in terms of price to get what the comparison was on that day, because this would have to be a really significant discount to make up for the fact that it's largely a disposable car.
If you understand the Yugo's limitations at the beginning and can actually get one for a price near the advertised $39.90, then the little Yugo could be a viable everyday in-town commuter and a fine alternative to a used car. Our next new country import, the Hyundai Excel, has a suggested price range of $5,500 to $7,500. Any dealer markups aren't yet known. However, unlike the Yugoslavian Yugo, the Korean-made Hyundai is a brand new design. In addition to this four-door sedan, Hyundai will offer the Excel in 3- and 5-door hatchback versions. All of these subcompacts should be available in 3 levels of trim.
Before they go on, I want to say, I like the Excel. I really do. It's a new design, but it was based on a Mitsubishi, as I recall. But much cleaner lines, much sharper. So generally, before they even go on, I like the Excel. I looked at it numerous times because around when the Excel was being available, I was 16, 17, 18 years old. And I didn't have the money. I didn't have $6,000 to buy a car. And it is interesting how the Yugo top was at the bottom of where the Excel picked up. But I looked at these several times, and I liked them for one very specific reason. They were honest. And I like the styling. This is car, right? Squared off trunk lid gives you the most space, squared off a little bit of a bend right here on the doors, right above the door handle. This is just car. And I totally dig it. I'm not saying the Excel is one of my dream cars from the 80s, but I've always had a positive feeling about this car.
Car this size, there's plenty of passenger room. And with the sedan's wide rear doors, getting in the back is easy. The rear windows roll all the way down, too, a feature some luxury cars don't even have. The Hyundai also has lots of little standard features. There's full carpeting and heat vents for the backseat passengers, as well as a locking glove box and a locking gas door. There's a dead pedal and lots of vents, also an inside trunk or hatch release and a rear window defogger.
Look at the quality of the fit and finish on these interior plastic pieces here. I mean, we've got, a plus or minus 1 to 2 millimeters here. Right? It's just, that's not craftsmanship per se. But it's, they're talking about things that we would take for granted today, carpet. But back then, at this price range, that was important.
The Excel can be had with one of 3 transmissions, a 4-speed, 5-speed, or a 3-speed automatic. But there's no doubt that this is an economy car. If you're too frugal to order an option like cruise control, they still comment on your economic status by continuing to mark the non-functioning switch.
That's hilarious, because not only do you see this on cars, right, where here's where the button should be, but here they actually labeled it. It says cruise right there. You just can't press any buttons. That's great. And if you watch that, when they press on it, the whole thing flexes, right? I saw that on the Oldsmobile Aurora video and commented on it. And here it is, and it's admittedly a much cheaper car. Here it's acceptable. But that's hilarious.
And the spare tire cover is crude cardboard, although the sedan's trunk is large and opens all the way down to the bumper.
You know what? I'm going to take issue with that. I don't care what the spare tire cover is. I don't understand why that would be an issue, why they would feel... I don't care if you took... I don't know. plastic bags and covered it. As long as I have kind of a floor and there's carpet on top, I don't care what's underneath it. I'm going to need that spare tire like once in my ownership of the vehicle. Other than that, I don't care what's... I take issue with that one.
By the way, standard tires are US-made Goodyear Corsa GTs. Under the hood, there's a 1.5-liter overhead cam 4 that was designed by Mitsubishi but built by Hyundai. Mitsubishi owns part of Hyundai, and much of this car, including the engine and suspension, is based on the Japanese Colt Mirage design. So, as you might expect, the Excel performs and feels about like a Japanese front-drive sedan. The ride may be a little softer, and the steering a little slower, but the Excel is very competent on the highway or in the city.
You know what? I'm going to add there that, first off, that engine, that makes that engine almost, not quite, right? 50%, 45%, something like that, larger than the Yugos. And they still don't mention horsepower numbers, but that's a meaningful difference. And I'm not sure how I feel a Mitsubishi-designed engine built by Hyundai. We have to put ourselves back in that time. Hyundai was an unknown quantity, at least in the U.S. Here's a car, and it's, I think, very good looking. I do. Again, we're not gorgeous here. We're not talking about a Lamborghini. But this is just car. It reminds me a little bit of, honestly, some... well, Dodge Colts and some early Toyotas. Just car. I love it. I absolutely love it. And we didn't know if Hyundai was going to be good or not. And it turned out they weren't great, but they were better than Yugo. Also, them saying that it feels a lot like a small Mitsubishi, a small Japanese car, but softer with slower steering, that's not necessarily bad. While the Japanese cars had a tight, engaging feeling relative to, some of the more heavy, lumbering American cars, having a slightly softer ride in a car that's much smaller with a smaller wheelbase, I'm not sure that would be a downside.
Our overall impression? The Excel seems very solid, well-built, and finished, so we don't think Hyundai will have any trouble meeting their 100,000 car projected sales for this year. The fit and finish on our early production car was good, with no squeaks or rattles. Only the radio failed to work as advertised. Quality is so good on the Hyundai Excel that Mitsubishi is planning to sell the car through its own dealers by the 1988 model year.
Really? I have an overall opinion of the Excel as being that half step up from the Yugo, honestly. That it wasn't built for durability, the interior materials weren't built for durability, and not necessarily the engine. Now, I don't have anything to back that up. And if you had different experience with this engine, with that Mitsubishi engine, with Hyundai at this time, feel free to leave a comment below. I appreciate it. But generally, I have a feeling that everything was just kind of okay. But that is a rather ringing endorsement from them, especially considering the soft praise they gave the Yugo, to say that this was so high quality and free of squeaks and rattles, and Mitsubishi was going to start selling it. Honestly, there are not many other retro review reactions that we've done together that I can think of that come close to how positive that comment was about a car that I kind of think of as disposable.
So both the Hyundai Excel and the Yugo GV are more than funny foreign flukes. They just may be the first successful wave of a new low-price import invasion.
Well, I'm almost sorry I stopped it where I did. I also do that when we're watching TV shows, by the way. If we're watching, on Hulu or something like that, I have a supernatural ability to pause right before a commercial. So, let's talk about both of these together. I've always wanted to own both of these cars. I'm almost ashamed to admit it. But, when I started this channel and I love to talk to you all about it, I absolutely love the 80s and 90s cars, those crappy cars. It was such a transformational time of it in America and in American auto manufacturing. And these two came out, and the Yugo hit some sales and then disappeared, and then their factory was bombed. Hyundai had a bunch of sales. Quality wasn't great, reliability wasn't great, but they improved, and they invested, and they improved, and they offered a bigger warranty, and they improved, and they became the juggernaut they are today, and arguably one of the styling leaders in the world. It's a dramatic difference between the trajectory of these two. And I admit I've always wanted them. I've always wanted the Yugo. I think I would get tired of it very quickly. One of my first jobs, I was a busboy at a steakhouse. And one of the ladies, I think she worked in the kitchen. She had a Yugo. And, again, I'm 15 years old. And I remember being like, oh my gosh, let me look at it. And looking at it. And being just, thought it was so cool. But the story I wanted to share about the Yugo, if you haven't heard it before, is that I think it was 86, it might have been 87, but I think it was 86, my parents needed to buy a new car. We went to the Ford dealer here in Charlotte on South Boulevard, and they had the license to sell Yugos. And my dad, being super cheap and basically just needing something to bomb around back and forth to work in, he gravitated towards the Yugo. And the price, right? And I remember the salesman saying, you don't want this car. And I seem to recall he opened the door and was like, listen, and shut it. And then I think he went to another car. It might have been like a Topaz or something like that, and shut the Ford door. He's like, do you hear that? This thing here, you don't want it. Now, we ended up with, I've talked about it many times, an 86 Mustang, as a matter of fact. And I appreciate this. I don't know who that man was, and all the bad reputation that auto salesmen get. That guy was honest with us. And I think it probably prevented us from getting something kind of crappy. Now, keep in mind, I don't know if my dad knew all the history behind it. My dad, one of the reasons we were looking for another car is because his previous car had been a Fiat Spider that caught fire. And my dad's owned MGs and everything else. So him buying something crappy with a manual was not unusual. As for the Excel, like I said, I've looked at it several times, and it was not impressive. The interior materials weren't nicer than what you could get on anything else. The engine wasn't more refined. It wasn't more powerful. It wasn't anything. But the Excel has always struck me as so honest about what it was. Like, it wasn't trying to use style to be fancier than it was. It wasn't trying to brag about individual things in the interior to be fancier than what it was. It just was cheap transportation that you hoped was going to be reliable. And I've always liked it. I've driven a couple of Excels and then later drove the S Coupe. And I always liked the cheap, crappy, noisy, not much power honesty of these cars. And I've always wanted to have one for that reason. I think the time's probably passed. I mean, we're talking about something that's 35 years in the past. I'm not sure I want to buy a 35-year-old car and have it be a Hyundai Excel. Or a Yugo for that matter. But I've always wanted to have one just to bomb around in it, man. So, you know what? I'm going to end it here because this is going a little long. If you had either one of these cars, if you liked it, if you hated it, if it was reliable and surprised you, or if it was a piece of trash, man, let me know below. But this was a good one. Thanks for being here, my friends. I'll see you next week.